I come from the great sea to Middle-earth. This is where I and my heirs will live until the end of the world." These words were spoken by Elendil when he and his sons and the rest of his faithful reached the shores of the continent after the destruction of Numenor. They are the same words sung by Aragorn at his coronation at the end of the Return of the King, for it was he who laid the foundation for two powerful new kingdoms of men, southern Gondor and northern Arnor. The Second Age was slowly coming to an end when Elendil, settling in the north near the elven kingdom of Lindon, founded the city of Númenor. Elendil's sons Anarion and Isildur went south and built Minas Aenir and Minas Ithil. It is no coincidence that the cities were named similarly to the two brothers, Ithil meaning moon and Aenir meaning sun in the Elvish language of Sindarin used by the scholars of Middle-earth. Thus the Tower of the Sun and the Tower of the Moon stood opposite each other. Then, Isildur and Anarion also built the capital of Gondor, Osgiliath. There, the most powerful of the rescued Palantirs was being saved. Others were still in Gondor in the Tower of Orthanc and then in Minas Aenir and Minas Ithil. The three northern Palantiri were then at Númenor in the tower on the top of Amon Sul or the Wind Hill and at Elostirion. The stone there was special, however, as it still retained its connection to the network of the Undying Lands and thus could not be used to telephone Gondor or other parts of Arnor. Elendil officially ruled both realms, but resided mainly in the north, while southern Gondor was jointly administered by his sons. The refugees from Numenor mingled with the colonists who had lived there for several generations, as well as with the lesser people, and the power of both kingdoms grew. Sauron, however, was not going to stand idly by and gathered his own armies and went to war. The Gondorians did not expect him, mistakenly believing that Sauron had perished during the destruction of Numenor. Therefore, the city of Minas Ithil could not withstand the surprise attack and fell to the Mordorian hordes. Isildur himself, however, managed to escape with his family, taking with him the seedling of the White Tree, which incidentally, he had also saved from Sauron back on Numenor. But the two brothers who ruled Gondor knew that they could not defeat the armies of Mordor alone. Isildur therefore went north to his father Elendil and the High King of the High Elves, Gil-galad. Together, they then headed to Imladris or Rivendell, where they met a distant relative of Elendil's family, Gil-galad's aide Elrond the half-elf. There the last alliance of elves and men was formed, sealed by King Elendil in the name of the creator Iluvatar himself. The armies then remained in the Rivendell for about 3 more years, forging weapons and preparing for war. After that, the combined army marched south, where it was reinforced by the wood elves of King Orifer, the elves of Lorien, and also the dwarves of Khazad-dûm, or later Moria. Eventually, Anarion, who until then had held Gondor against Sauron forces, also arrived. The orcs, meanwhile, destroyed the gardens of Ents through which the army was to pass to cut off the last of the alliance from supplies. It also appears from one of Tolkien's letters that at the same time, they probably exterminated the Ents entirely, dooming the arboreal creatures to a slow millennia-long extinction. Finally, the last alliance with the armies of Sauron clashed on Dagorlad. The name literally means battle plain. The encounter began rather unhappily for the allies. For the wood elves are not exactly in love with their noble kin, and King Orifer refused to listen to the great King Gil-galad. The forest folk therefore attacked on their own and suffered heavy losses, including Orifer himself. The elves of Lorien were similarly ill-fated, many of whom were driven into the nearby marshes and slaughtered there, which is why the region later came to be called the Dead Marshes, and even millennia later you could still see the faces of the fallen in the waters, and ghostly lights danced above the surface. However, Elendil and Gil-galad were eventually able to push Sauron's armies back through the Black Gate and into Mordor, heading straight for the Dark Tower. They besieged Barad-dûr, but were unable to breach its massive fortifications, unmatched anywhere else in Middle-earth. For 7 years they fought in the shadow of the Dark Lord's fortress, and during this time Elendil's son Anarion lost his life when he was struck by a thrown boulder. Finally, Sauron himself came out of his tower and launched a final counterattack. He pushed allies up the slopes of Mount Doom, where he faced off in a direct battle with Kings Gil-galad and Elendil. Both were mighty warriors with legendary weapons and centuries of experience, but against the power of the Dark Lord with the One Ring on his hand, they were ultimately no match. Sauron burned Gil-galad with the searing heat of his hand, and then killed Elendil as well, his sword Narsil breaking under him in the fall. However, the king's son Isildur took up the ruined weapon and cut off One Ring from the Dark Lord's hand, destroying his physical body. The resistance of the orcs and other monsters was broken by the loss of their leader, and the army of Mordor disintegrated. The last alliance of elves and men had triumphed, though it had paid a terrible price. What was worse? Isildur did not take the opportunity to destroy the ring in the fires of Mount Doom. Instead, he went north to become king of Arnor in place of his father Elendil, whom he also buried in the kingdom. Meanwhile, Isildur's nephew Meneldyl, son of Anarion, became the new ruler of Gondor. It was only 2 years before Isildur fell to a surprise orc attack and lost One Ring. All of his sons except the youngest, Valadil, died, and the Númenorian Empire was finally divided into the separate kingdoms of Gondor and Arnor. While Gondor gradually grew in power and the southern kingdom prospered, Arnor soon began to decline. The country even broke up, into the 3 fractious lands of Arthedain, Cardolan and Rhudaur. Sauron saw it as an easy target. Though he himself could not yet return to the material world, he sent at least his most powerful servant to deal another devastating blow to Aragorn's ancestors. The Third Age was beginning, and the northern human kingdom of Arnor was entering it with hope. The Dark Lord Sauron had been banished and the surviving warriors of the last alliance could return to a peaceful life of prosperity and relative safety. Only, like their ancestors once on Numenor, the men of Arnor soon became their own worst enemies. Discord flared to its fullest after the death of the 10th king, whose 3 sons all longed to ascend the throne. The conflict escalated to such an extent that it led to the breakup of the kingdom into 3 smaller empires. Arthedain was ruled by the rightful heir to the throne, from whose line Aragorn later descended. While in Rhudaur and Cardolan, Isildur's house died out over the years. Also at this time the city of Númenor, founded by Elendil, was abandoned and Fernast in Arthedain became the new metropolis of the north. Sauron soon noticed the decline in population and the strife between the inhabitants of Arnor. Since he himself could not yet take physical form, he sent at least his most powerful servant, the Lord of the Nazgul, to the north. He founded the sorcerer kingdom of Angmar in the north and began to sow further strife between the successor countries of Arnor. Eventually he took control of Rhudaur and gathered armies of orcs, giants and humans with which he attacked and sacked Cardolan. He also besieged the tower on the winds on the borders of Arthedain, which was defended by the then King Arvleg. Despite valiant resistance, the Arnorian warriors could not hold their own against a stronger opponent. Arvleg fell and the tower was destroyed. However, the local palantir that has since lain in Fernast was saved, and it was against this city that the Witch King set out to crush his enemies for good. But Eofor, only 18 years old, the son of Arvleg, refused to surrender so easily and, with the help of the elves of Lindon, repulsed the attack. He was subsequently joined by reinforcements from Elrond of Rivendell and Lorien, and the Witch King was forced to retreat back to Angmar. For a time there was peace. In Arthedain, the hobbits arrived and received a gift of a sparsely populated area they named the Shire. The halflings were formally subject to the crown, but the kings allowed them considerable autonomy. The second significant event, however, was not nearly as positive. A plague arrived from the south, wiping out most of the last inhabitants of Cardolan. Moreover, the Witch King desecrated the mounds of the dead with his dark magic by sending dark spirits into them. Angmar grew stronger and the remnants of Arnor continued to weaken. The 15th king of Arthedain, Arvedui, however, married Firiel, daughter of the then ruler of Gondor. He later died without an heir, and for the first time in centuries the opportunity arose to unite the two related realms under one crown, to which Arvedui had the greatest claim through his lineage and marriage. The proud and powerful nobles of Gondor, however, had no interest in being ruled by the ruler of a slowly dying kingdom from the north, and so chose the successful general Ernil instead. Thus the hope of uniting the descendants of Numenor was dashed and the fate of Arthedain sealed. It was not long before Angmar launched a second attack. Arvedui summoned his allies and defended himself in the fortified city of Fernost. He was even aided by the hobbit archers of the Shire, yet he was unable to hold the metropolis and had to retreat to the old dwarven mines in the Blue Mountains. Later he retreated again to the far north, where he drowned with his rescued Palantirs in the sinking of a ship sent for him by the elves of Lindon, and so ended Arthedain and with it the history of Arnor. For the king's son Aranarth never sat on the throne again, and became only chief of rangers who have guarded the last remaining inhabitants of the lands of Arnor, including the hobbits, ever since. But the Witch King did not rejoice in his victory for long. For Gondor had belatedly sent his fleet north, led by the skilled warrior Prince Ernir. In Lindon, the Gondorians then joined forces with the elves and surviving warriors of Arnor. However, the Nazgul Lord was not deterred. Instead of staying in the fortress city of Fernost he set out to meet his new enemies and attack. However, he grossly underestimated the military might of Gondor and soon had to begin retreating. Moreover, the Gondor cavalry made an unexpected maneuver and attacked from the north. The Witch King therefore decided to flee back to Angmar, but he was not allowed to do so either. For reinforcements from Rivendell arrived, led by the mighty Glorfindel, and the defeat of Angmar was complete. The Witch King at least tried to kill Prince Ernir, but was deterred by Glorfindel's power, and finally fled, at least laughing at the heir to the throne of Gondor. Ernir wanted to pursue the Nazgul Lord. But Glorfindel made a prophecy that the Witch King would not die by the hand of the man, which was eventually fulfilled during the Battle of Pelennor Fields. Victory over Angmar was almost complete, but neither Sauron or his most powerful servant were yet finished with the descendants of Numenor. While the Dark Lord slowly gained more and more power in Dol Guldur, the Witch King gathered the other ringwraiths and made his way secretly to Mordor. There he gathered a new army and took revenge on Gondor for his ignominious defeat. He invaded Minas Ithil and after a long siege he conquered the city and for the first time ever captured one of the Palantir, which he gave to Sauron. It was through this stone that the Dark Lord later poisoned the minds of Saruman and Denethor. The city of Minas Ithil was subsequently renamed from the Tower of the Moon to Minas Morgul, the Tower of the Sorcerer. The name of the opposite city, Minas Aenir, was also changed to Minas Tirith, Watchtower. When Prince Ernir then succeeded his father on the throne, Lord Nazgulu began to provoke him with challenges to duel. The wily king finally accepted, made his way to Minas Morgul, and has never been seen since. The line of Gondor kings died, and the ruling administrators took power in the southern kingdom. But Sauron's shadow grew larger, while the power of the descendants of Numenor continued to decline. Fortunately, they did not have to stand alone against the Dark Lord. The riders of the north lent them aid in their darkest moment, but that is a story for next time.